All right, Rabosai, good morning. Let us begin. First, I want to thank Rena Dubin for giving a beautiful shiur yesterday, and let's begin again also by thanking all of our sponsors. So to thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Sivan, to thank Naftoli and Chava Tilson from Eretz Yisroel for dedicating the shiur and drushos this month. In gratitude to Benjamin Wohl of Naftoli's Chaver for introducing him to the Daf Yomi. May Hashem bless us all to finish the Daf Yomi cycle together and celebrate with a siyum together in Eretz Yisroel. Amen. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for Sivan, Baruch Mary and Rena Dubin. May Hashem continue to protect our brothers and sisters in Eretz Yisroel, and may all of our children remain safe and complete their year of learning with a deep connection to the land and to Hashem's Torah. Beautiful. To thank our week of learning sponsor, Mrs. Selma Wolf, for a Fushima for her grandson Kobe Rothberg, Yaakov Zev Ben Sivya Devora, and to thank our Daf Yomi sponsor today, Baruch Fischel and Sonia Kozlovsky and family, in commemoration of the 7th yahrzeit of Baruch Fischel's father, Leon Kozlovsky, Aryeh Ben Baruch Zichron Livracha. So probably most of you don't know, but Mr. Kozlovsky Zichron Livracha was a charter member of the Shul Daf Yomi. When I say charter member, he kind of started it, so and looped me in together with a couple of his chaverim, all of those individuals who were udim mutzal me'ish, sparks that were saved from the fire of the Holocaust, and individuals who went on with incredible strength and courage to be able to rebuild their lives. Good. I'm sorry. Is that a little better? Good. I should hold it the whole time. But come on. So we hope that in Meretz Hashem, in the merits of our Talmud Torah, Mr. Kozlovsky's Neshama Shtaf and Aliyah, and the family in Nechama. And also with that, let us begin. So we have an incredible daf. It's more like a dafala. It's a dafala today, So 2 lines. So we're picking up on the bottom of Nun Hey Amud Beis. So remember again, as Rebbe Akiva began the sugya yesterday, we saw in the Mishnah an interesting machlokes. And that machlokes revolved around how many stands there are. Remember again, we have 2 groupings of blood. We have dam hasoyer, dam hapar. Right? The blood of the goat. Remember again, that was part of there are the 2 seirim. The one is the seir la'Hashem, the one is the seir la'Azazel. We have not focused on the seir la'Azazel. That'll be a separate sugya. And then there is the dam hapar. So remember again, both of them are pretty much treated identically. Meaning there are the hazos, the sprinkling inside of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and the sprinkling on the curtain outside of the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So the way the Mishnah read Tanakama's view was that there are 2 different stands. One stand for the dam hasoyer, one stand for the dam hapar. Rabbi Yehuda held that no, there was only one stand. And his logic behind saying there was only one stand was, Rabbi Yehuda's logic was essentially, you were always using one of those bloods, right? You were always using it. So therefore, again, there was really never a time where you needed both of the receptacles, both of the mizrakos, both of the bowls containing the blood to be placed down simultaneously. Therefore, there was really only a need for one mizrak, for one stand. So we'll say this led to another discussion. Just about in general regarding the halacha of why not. Let's go take a step back. The Gemara then highlighted the idea that perhaps according to Rabbi Yehuda there was a concern regarding confusion. To which the Gemara said, well, you can go ahead and take care of confusion by how? By labeling the different stands. So I will say this then led to a conversation regarding breira, retroactive clarification. And the Gemara posited that Rabbi Yehuda does not hold of the concept of breira. So that's what we're picking up with today. So the Gemara says, take a look. The Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda, less lay breira, 4 lines up from the bottom, nun hamid beis. And Rabbi Yehuda does not hold of breira, minalan. From where do we know that? So the Gemara says, Ilema mehad disnan. So maybe you'll say from the following. So let's listen to this. So a person goes ahead and purchases wine from the kusim. So you heard a little bit about this in yesterday's shiur. So remember again, the kusim, we've dealt with them. I believe that we deal with the kusim in almost every single masechta in one way or another. So remember again, the kusim were a group of individuals resettled from Kusa, put into Eretz Yisroel by Shalmaneser, the king of Ashur, who had a very smart military strategy, which was if you want to go ahead and conquer nations and prevent them from rebelling, so uproot them from their indigenous land, put them somewhere else, because if people are settled on an alien land, they're much less likely to revolt. So he goes ahead and resettles these Kusim in Eretz Yisroel. The problem was the Kusim were worshipping idolatry. As a result, there was an outbreak of lions, which is obviously not the norm in Eretz Yisroel, and so they went ahead and they converted. But there's a whole shaila of gere arayos, gere emes. Not arayos with an ayin, immorality, but gere arayos with an aleph, lions. Was their conversion a legitimate conversion or not? So this was the fundamental shaila when it comes to the kusim. Is it just that they converted in order to go ahead and escape the plague of lions, or was there a general conversion, a general commitment to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? To further complicate this, they were found to be worshiping idolatry even after their conversion, which cast even more doubt upon the legitimacy of their conversion in general. So, in Hilchos Gerus, there's a lot of interesting discussion, halachic literature, regarding if someone converts and then is found what they call a ger shechazer l'suro. Person converts and then kind of returns to their previous ways after their conversion. Does that automatically invalidate the conversion or not? This is a whole discussion about this. In any event, so when it comes to the kusim, there's a general ambiguity, or ambiguity is the wrong word. There's a general doubt as to what exactly we do with them. So the Gemara says over here, so therefore, if you were to go ahead and purchase wine from kusim, in general, you would retithe it. You would retithe it because you have to assume that unfortunately, again, kusim are not vigilant with the halachos of trumas and maestros, which will require you once again to retithe the wine. So here's the situation: you bought wine from kusim, but what happened now? The Gemara says, and it is erev Shabbos simcha shecha. Here's the problem: so you are not permitted to tithe on Shabbos. Why are you not permitted to tithe on Shabbos? So remember again, it's tikkun mana. Ultimately, agarmake bepatish. So the idea is that you are doing something constructive, which resembles a malacha. So it's dirabanan, it's not doraisa, but one is not permitted to separate out tithes on Shabbos. So what do? The problem is you want to drink this wine. You can't drink it without tithing it. So what do you do? So the Gemara says, Omeid va'omer. Say as follows. Shnei lugin shani asalafish hayin truma. So 2 lugin that I will separate at a future date. When is that future date? Matzah Shabbos, right? It just means not now. And if so, 2 lugin that I'll separate will be truma, top of nun vav, first line of nun vav. So the Gemara says, Asara Meiser Rishon, right? 10 lugin ultimately again will be Meiser Rishon, Tisha Meiser Sheni, 9 lugin will be Meiser Sheni, Umechel V'shose Miyad Divrei Rabbi Meir. So Rabbi Meir is of the opinion that halacha l'maisa, you can go ahead and allocate different parts of the wine, ultimately again to go ahead and satisfy your tithing obligations, even though you're not separating anything right now. Those allocations allow you to go ahead and drink the wine at this moment and move on. Those are words Rabbi Meir. Amud Beis, Rabbi say. Amud Beis. Rabbi Huda, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon Osrin. Rabbi Huda, Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Shimon ultimately again say that it is asr. Now before we go on, the Gemara presupposes that this is a machlokes of breira. That's why the Gemara says alma ein breira, and the Gemara is assuming that what this machlokes is as follows. Rabbi Meir holds that halacha l'maisa on erev Shabbos you can go ahead, or even on Shabbos itself, you can go ahead and say the 2 lugin that I'm going to separate from this barrel. Now, interestingly enough, there's a whole discussion. This Gemara appears, actually, we quote it over here, the Mizrasha quotes it from Gittin and from Baba Kama. So in different places, sometimes there's a mentioning of a particular side of the barrel. But again, it's not really important for our discussion. Rabbi Meir holds is like this, that you can go ahead and actively allocate which portions are going to be Truma, Meiser Rishon, Meiser Sheni, and then on Motzei Shabbos or Sunday, when you go ahead and you separate out, it turns out that what? Retroactively, it is clarified that which you separated on Motzei Shabbos was really what? That which you designated on Shabbos itself. That's the concept of breira. So what breira says is something, so I do something now which is ambiguous, but later on I clarify it, and later on when I clarify it, it becomes retroactively clarified to the point of the initial designation. So according to Rabbi Meir, on Motzei Shabbos, when you go and actively separate out the Truma, the Meiser Rishon, the Meiser Sheni, it turns out that the portions you're designating on Motzei Shabbos were the actual portions that you designated beforehand on Shabbos. That's called retroactive clarification breira. So the Gemara assumes that Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Shimon, who says that this process does not work, reject the notion of breira. So the Gemara is presupposing that this is a machlokas of yesh breira or ein breira. To which the Gemara says, maybe not. Mimai. Dilma, shiny hasam, kidiktani taima. We'll say perhaps over here, even if you would normally hold the breira, Rabbi Yehuda doesn't like this for a different reason. Why doesn't he like this? So the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Meir, Iya tamoda shema yibake hanod v'nimtza shosa tvalim lemafreya. See, Rabbi say, listen to this. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, I have no problem with breira. I hold the breira as well. I hold that you can engage retroactive clarification. I have a different issue over here. What's my different issue? It's very nice. You're going to sit here on Shabbos, you're going to designate this amount for Meiser Rishon, this amount for Meiser Sheni, this amount for Truma. Fantastic. But what could happen? The barrel breaks. The barrel breaks. I will say, what happens if so let's analyze this. So now you're standing Shabbos, you make these designations. You make Kiddush a first time, a second time, right? If it's a good Shabbos, a 10th time. And what happens? The barrel breaks. Both say, what happens when the barrel breaks now? What happens when the barrel breaks? It turns out that what? You drank tevel. It turns out that you drank untithed produce. Because halacha l'maisa, you now went ahead. Not intentionally, but just the mitzvah is such that if that barrel of wine is not around by the time Motzei Shabbos comes, it turns out that you can never go ahead and properly separate out those tithes, and therefore it turns out that you went and you drank tevel. So we'll say, this is incredible. So Rabbi Yehuda is saying, I accept the concept of breira, but I think you're just playing with fire over here because the barrel could break. So what does Rabbi Meir respond to that? Rabbi say, this is incredibly profound. Va'amar lahem, and ultimately again Rabbi Meir responds, l'chishei bokeh. Rabbi Meir says, let's worry about barrel breakage when it breaks. Let's worry about it when it happens. Take a look at Rashi, Tab Rashi, the Cheshei Baka. Nochushlo. When the barrel breaks, we'll worry about it. Kilomar, lo chayshinon l'shema yibaka, the efshar l'masale l'shomer. The Meir says, you can't go through life worrying that the barrel will break. Right? The Meir says, when the barrel breaks, we'll deal with it. So let's say you understand what's happening over here. Such a profound life machlokes. You know, in general, when you embark upon something in life, it's always good to do your risk analysis, right? So what are the risks involved in any particular endeavor? But there's a challenge with that. What's the challenge? Is that you could analyze the risk, and if you truly analyze the risk with any given course of action, often the only logical result is inaction. Inaction, because everything comes with a risk. And so, there's this, we've talked about this many times, there's this incredible phrase of analysis paralysis, right? You can analyze any situation to the point that you paralyze yourself. That there simply doesn't make sense to act because there are so many risks. I'll just say very quickly, then we'll have to go on. To me, the story that best captures this particular issue is when we know the famous Gemara Maseches Berachos, where Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was approached to go ahead and be the Reish Mesivta, to be the Rosh Yeshiva. And he goes to his wife, they approach him, and he says, I have to speak with my wife. And his wife says, essentially, are you crazy? Right? What's the matter with you? Because remember, again, this is right in the aftermath of the story of Rabbi Gamliel. They had deposed, right, Rabbi Gamliel from his position. And so his wife says to him, why in a million years would you ever touch this position? Look at what they did to the guy before you. Right? That's usually a pretty good indicator if you should take a job. What happened to your predecessor? Right? What happened to the person before, especially in klal work? Right? What happened to the person before you? Right? So his wife said to him, are you crazy? And furthermore, she said, also, you're 18 years old. Remember again, he's Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. So Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says the most incredible answer. He says, Mutav, he says, it is better to use the zugisa, the cup of fine crystal today, even though it's going to break, than to never lose it at all. What Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was saying was, I recognize and I'm fully cognizant of the risks associated with this position. And if I was a betting man, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, I would bet it's not going to last too long, even though it did. Right? I would bet it's not going to last too long. But when an opportunity comes, sometimes you have to take it. And you can't worry about all the things which can go wrong in life. And I both say, isn't this the greatest challenge in life? To know when to say the risk is too high, and therefore better idea to pass, or to say, I recognize the risks, but at the end of the day, the opportunity is here, and I just simply have to seize it. So I say, see what's happening over here in this machlokes, Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda? Are you choshesh for the barrel bursting? Right? Are you choshesh for barrel breakage? So Rabbi Yehuda says, yes, you have to be choshesh for barrel breakage. Therefore, you can't go and allocate different parts for Trumas and Maasros on Shabbos, because maybe by the time you come along to separating it, you may come to go and have no barrel left at all. To which Rabbi Meir will respond, how about we deal with barrel breakage when it happens? Let's deal with it when it happens. You can't spend your life worrying what if. You can't spend your life trying to foresee every single thing that can go wrong. Because if you end up doing that, you have no wine. If you end up doing that, you have no opportunities. If you end up doing that, you have no life. What happens if the barrel breaks? We'll worry about it then. Incredible. So we'll say, but 1 second, but let's go back now. But we just said before that Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold the Breira. So where do we see that Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold the Breira? To which the Gemara says, here we go. Elo miditani ayo. Rather, we see that Rabbi Yehuda does not hold with the concept of Breira from ayo. The Tani ayo, because ayo said, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, ein adam masna al shnei dvarim ke'achar. Rabbi say a little bit of chazara from our Eruvin days. Rabbi Yehuda holds that you cannot make, now literally what this means is you cannot stipulate regarding two things like one. So we'll see what this means in just a moment. Elo, im ba'chacham lemizrach, eruva lemizrach. Right, Lamairav, Eruva Lamairav. Aval Lakan Ulakan Lo. So let's analyze this case for just a moment. Take a look at Rashi. Ein Adam Masna Al Shnei Dvarim. Li Lahaniach Shnei Reuven. So remember again, back to our Eruv Tchumen days. So remember again, you have 2,000 Amos from your domicile in any direction you want on Shabbos. But however, what can you do? You could create an Eruv Tchumen. What does your Eruv Tchumen do, Rabbi? Essentially, you can establish your domicile somewhere within 2,000 amos of your original domicile and extend your Erev Tchumen another 2,000 amos. And again, for a Jew, home is where your food is, right? Very simple. Right? By the nations of the world, home is where your heart is. Right? For us, it's home is where your food is. Home is where your food is. So ultimately, again, you could extend your domicile a little bit by placing food within 2,000 amos original location. Now, I both say the Gemara is dealing with a very interesting situation. In this case over here, I want to make 2 Erev Tchumens, right? And now, okay, well, one more piece. I'm sorry. Now, remember, if you don't make an Erev Tchumen, you have 2,000 amos in what direction? All directions. The moment you make an Erev Tchumen and extend your Tchum in one direction, what happens? You lose your Tchum in every other direction. So we'll say it's an incredible yisod. No Eruv, you get 2,000 amos in any given direction. You make an Eruv, you gain incredible amount in one direction, but lose mobility in every other direction. So now watch this. So look at Rashi. Rashi says, Laniach shnei eruvin, echad lemizrach ve'echad lemayrav. So we'll say, here's what you want to do in this case. I want to make an Eruv to the east and to the west. Shim yavo shnei chachamim. Everyone say, now why am I making an Eruv? Because there are 2 scholars in residence who are coming to town. 2 Talmidei Chacham coming to town. Echad lemizrach ve'echad lemayrav. V'lomar le'iza mehen she'ertzeh ani elech lemachar. Now we'll say, I know Rabbi A is coming from the east, Rabbi B is coming from the west. I don't know whose shiur I want to go to. So what do I want to do? I want to make an Erev Tchumen in both directions. And that way, whoever shiur I want to go to tomorrow, I'll have the ability to do so. So the Gemara both say it doesn't work. You cannot make Eruvim like that. Lefi sheknias Erev ben hashmashasi. Because they'll say why? The way Erev Tchumen works is how both say that you establish your domicile when ben hashmashas. Right, Friday evening, twilight Friday. You Ukashizeh Bora Lamachar Ose Shiyirtza Lo Samchinon Abreira Lo Marhovrar Sha'ir L'Tzad Chacham Zeh Kana Shvisa Emesh Ela Achacham Echad Ve'in Yodeh Le'ezer Ruach Yavo Hu Masne In Bala Mizrach. Supposed to listen to this. Therefore, case number one is where there are two Talmidei Chachamim coming into town. One from the east, one from the west. I have a great chap. I'm going to make a conditional Eruv in both directions. And then tomorrow I'll decide whose shiur I want to go to, and that will be the Eruv that'll be activated. So the Gemara says that doesn't work. That doesn't work. Now, interestingly enough, what does work? Let's say there's one Talmid Chacham coming into town, right? Coming to give a shiur, one scholar in residence. And what's the issue? Well, I know I want to go hear him, but what's the problem? I don't know if he's coming from the east or from the west. So what do? I set up an Eruv to the east and an Eruv to the west, and ultimately what? Whichever direction he comes, I'll use that Eruv. Interestingly enough, that does work. That does work. So once I see the two cases, in case number one, two Talmidei Chachamim coming in from the east and the west, I don't know who I want to hear. I don't know who I want to hear yet. So therefore I'll decide tomorrow, and that'll activate the Eruv. The Gemara says that doesn't work. But yet if one Talmid Chacham is coming in, but I just don't know which direction he's coming in for. So same thing. I make an Eruv to the east, Eruv to the west. That does work. We'll explain why that is in just a moment. But finish the Rashi. Rashi says, however, again, Ela Chacham Echad, V'nei Yodeh Le'ezer Ruach Yavo, but there's only one Talmid Chacham coming into town. I just don't know which direction he's coming in. So Masnei Bala Mizrach, Eruv Elev Shal Mizrach Yikne. If he comes in from the east, I say, I want my Eruv to the east to work. Ve'im ba l'marav, Eruv Shamarav Yikne, ve'ilu l'kan u'l'kan al shnei chacham l'makom she'eretz ha'ilech lo de'in breira. So we'll say, now let's come back to the Gemara for just a moment. So how are we going to prove that Rabbi Yehuda does not subscribe, does not hold of the concept of breira? Retroactive clarification. Here it is. We'll say back to the Gemara. The Tani Ayo, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Ein adam masna shnei dvarim ke'echad. A person cannot stipulate regarding two things like one. Ela im ba chacham le'mizrach, eruv le'mizrach. But rather again, if the chacham comes to the east, his eruv is to the east. Le'mayrav, eruv le'mayrav. If he comes to the west, the chacham is to the west. Ava lekan ulekan lo. But I will say, but again, if I know that the Talmidei Chacham, two Talmidei Chachamim are coming to town, one from the east, one from the west, on Erev Shabbos, I set up an Erev in both directions, but I haven't decided yet who I want to go and see. And I say to myself, I'm going to go ahead and decide on Shabbos who I'm going to see. That doesn't work. Why not, says the Gemara? Delo de'ein breira. Because ultimately, again, because Rabbi Yehuda holds ein breira, therefore you can't rely on retroactive clarification, and therefore it doesn't work. The Gemara says, 1 second, let me get this straight. So you're telling me, if I made two Eruvim, one to the east, one to the west, why? Because there are two Talmidei Chachamim coming in, one to the east, one to the west. I haven't yet decided who I want to go and hear. So therefore, again, Shabbos morning comes along. I decide I want to go to Rabbi A in the west. I choose to activate my Erev Tchumen in the west. It doesn't work. Doesn't work. Why not? Why doesn't it work? Ein breira. Ein breira. No retroactive clarification. But yet, right, what's the second case? The second case is, there's one Talmid Chacham coming in. But what? What's the problem? I don't know which direction. So same thing. I set up two Eruvim, one to the east, one to the west. Oh, I hear Shabbos morning, he's in the west. So what happens? That works. I can go to the west now to go ahead and hear the shiur. But 1 second, why should that work? The Gemara says, we asked about this. So the reason you told me that the case that two Talmidei Chacham coming in, one to the east, one to the west, that it doesn't work is why? Because ein breira, lemizrach u'lemayrav nami ein breira. But say, I don't understand the Gemara says, I don't understand the distinction between the two cases. It's the same halachic principle. In other words, the halachic principle by the two Talmidei Chacham coming into the east and west is breira. The principle of one Talmid Chacham coming in, but I'm not sure if he came from the east to the west, I make two Eruvim, also relies on what? Breira. So why is it that in the case of two Talmidei Chachamim, you're telling me ein breira, but yet in the case of one Talmid Chacham, I can activate the Erev on Shabbos, and it becomes retroactively clarified that the Erev I activate on Shabbos morning is the Erev I decided to activate on Erev Shabbos. That's also Breira. To which the Gemara says, no. Am Rabbi Yochanan ukshekvar ba chacham. So this is very interesting. The case of the one Talmid Chacham says not a Breira case. It's not a Breira case. Rather, what was it about? Say, here's what's fascinating. The Talmid Chacham already came to town on Erev Shabbos. He already came to town. He was already in town. What was the problem? I didn't know. Shebo said, what Breira says is like this. Breira says that there are things that are unknown now that will become known later on, and when you go ahead and you clarify them later on, we could go ahead and essentially retroactively backdate that knowledge to the point of the original event. So therefore, I will say, for example, in the Kisa, two Talmidei Chachamim, right, Rabbi A and Rabbi B, one is coming from the east, one is coming from the west. So I don't know who I want to go and see. I make two Eruvim, and the truth is, I'll decide Shabbos morning. Now, we'll say, can you make two Eruvim? Can you make two Eruv Tchumim, one to the east, one to the west? Can you do that? Yeah. No. Sorry. Right. Remember again, why not? Because remember the way Erev Tchumen works is you have the ability to extend your Tchum, but only in one direction. Right? Rabbi say, I want to be clear about this. You can only extend your Tchum in one direction. And remember again, in the case of the two Rabbanim who are coming in, my intention, I know I'm only going to use one direction. What's my problem? I don't know which one I want to use. So I will say, in that case, what I'm saying is like this. I know Rabbi A is coming from the east, Rabbi B is coming from the west, but what's the problem here? I don't know whose shiur I want to go to. So what do? On Erev Shabbos, I make two Eruvim, one to the east, one to the west. I know that what can't I do? Well, I know what can't I do? I can't use both. Right? I have commitment issues. I've been told that before, right? I have commitment issues. And therefore, again, I'm non-committal on Erev Shabbos who I want to go to. I want to decide on Shabbos morning. So Shabbos morning comes along, and I decide that what? I'm going to the east. I'm going to Rabbi A in the east. So now Rabbi Huda says, what's the halacha? It doesn't work. Why? Because in order for you to use the Erev in the east, what has to happen? You have to rely on the principle of Breira. Right? Because what Breira says, okay, wonderful. Now Shabbos morning at 10 o'clock, because you just woke up, right? At 10 o'clock, right? So now Shabbos morning, 10 o'clock, I just decided that I'm going ahead and going to the east. And that's great. So now Breira would say, now it's been retroactively clarified that the real Erev you made on Erev Shabbos was ultimately, by the way, Rabbi A at 10 o'clock was at Chabad. I just want to point out. It was at Chabad, just not casting, right, which is on time. Right, so we'll say, so what happens? So now it turns out Shabbos morning when I decide about Rabbi A in the east, it turns out retroactive clarification that the Erev that I made to the east on Erev Shabbos was the real Erev. Rabbi Huda says, doesn't work. Breira. Okay, so I just want to point out, so stop here for just a moment. This is the proof that Rabbi Huda does not subscribe to the concept of Breira. But here's the problem. What's case number two? Case number two, I will say, is there is one Talmid Chacham coming in. I don't know, is he coming from the east? Is he coming from the west? So what do I do Erev Shabbos? What do I do? Same thing, two Eruvim, one to the east, one to the west. Shabbos morning I hear, he's coming to the east. Fantastic. I will say, now even Rabbi Huda agrees that works, but I don't understand. Isn't that also Breira? It's the same thing. That's Breira also. Yet in case one of the two Talmidei Chacham, Rabbi Huda says it doesn't work. In case two of the one Talmid Chacham, Rabbi Huda says it does work. Today the Gemara says, "Va'abinan ba." I don't understand. Ma'ishna lekana lekan de ein Breira, lemizrach lemayrav nami ein Breira. Both say kana lekan is the case of the two rabbis. You told me that doesn't work as ein Breira, but the case of the one rabbi is also Breira. So why should that work? So the Gemara says, "Am Rabbi Yochanan ukishekvar ba chacham." Rabbi said, "This is incredible." The case over here is where what? Where halacha l'maisa, the Talmid Chacham already came on Erev Shabbos. So what Breira is at the time that Shabbos starts, the crucial piece of information is not yet known. It becomes known later on, And then Breira says you could retroactively apply the knowledge that you have now to the event that occurred beforehand. In the case of the one Talmid Chacham, I say actually he already came before Shabbos. What was missing? My knowledge. I just did it. In other words, the Talmid Chacham already arrived at his destination prior to Shabbos. So he was already in the east or in the west before Shabbos started. I didn't know. So I have to make two eruvim to go ahead and cover my bases. But I will say, in reality, the Metzias was already known before Shabbos. It was already known before Shabbos. So the truth is, my Eruv was already actually locked in already before Shabbos. Because what I said is, look, I don't know which direction the Talmid Chacham is coming from. It turns out he was already in town in the east an hour before Shabbos. So I didn't even realize it, but already before Shabbos started, my Eruv to the east was already locked in. Not relying on the concept of Breira. Shabbos say, here you have it. Rabbi Huda does not subscribe to the concept of Breira. I just point out something that's just so fascinating, that if you look at the difference between these two situations, let's go back there. So Gemara says as follows: V'hasha d'amrina Rabbi Huda ein Breira. Now that we've established, according to Rabbi Huda, there is no concept of Breira. Haksiva islay. Shabbos say, so remember again, this goes back to the whole discussion yesterday. Remember why Rabbi Huda did not want for there to be a collection box for obligatory bird offerings, right? What was his concern? Because you could have a case of chata shemesu ba'aleha, and ultimately, again, going ahead and just separating out some money from the collection box and allocating that to the obligatory offering would rely on Breira. Rabbi Huda doesn't hold of Breira. Rabbi will say, interestingly enough, if Rabbi Huda doesn't hold of Breira, he should rely on the efficacy of Ksiva. In other words, Rabbi will say, let's take a step back for just a moment. Why wouldn't Rabbi Huda just simply allow for two stands? Back to Yom Kippur now for just a moment. Two stands. On one stand right, Dam Hapar. On one stand right, Dam HaSoyer, and Shalom Al Yisrael. Just go ahead and have two stands. And there's no, because you have to rely on Breira, the Gemara says. So the Gemara says, Hashtamir Rabbi Yehuda, Ein Breira, Haksiva Islay, Yom Kippurim Nami Navitrei, V'nichtov Alayhu. As we'll say, we were all concerned that Rabbi Yehuda ultimately maybe doesn't want two stands because there's a concern of Breira getting mixed up with things. I don't understand. Why don't you just give a simple solution? Let there be two stands, because I will say it would appear that having two stands is definitely the easiest approach. And if you're concerned about getting things mixed up, just label them. Just label the stands. To which the Gemara says, why doesn't Rabbi Yehuda allow for two stands? Mishum chulsha de kohen gadol lav adaite. Because I will say we're concerned that even if you properly label the stands, there is so much happening on Yom Kippur, and the kohen gadol is fasting, that what could happen, because of chulshe literally means his weakness, but at the end of the day, perhaps again because he's fasting and he's tired, he's not going to pay attention to that which is written on the stand, and he may end up placing the wrong blood in the wrong stand. Look at Rashi, lava daite le'eyune biksiva. I will say sometimes even if you label things, right? Isn't this ma'asim b'chol yom? You might have things labeled milchiks and fleishiks, and you might have all color coded and everything, and yet what ends up happening? You still end up washing the wrong thing, and that's after you had a full dinner, right? And that's after you're fully caffeinated and everything is fine. Again, people make mistakes. Allah is kama v'kama, the Kohen Gadol is running around, and really, literally running around. He's in, he's out, he's back and forth, everywhere. And by the way, he's the only person doing everything. Rabbi Huda is concerned that even if you properly label the stands, he may go ahead and end up placing the wrong blood in the wrong place. So I will say, the way Rabbi Huda avoids that is essentially saying there's only one stand. If there's only one stand, then what? The truth is you never have both bloods stationary at any particular time, and therefore that's a greater, that assures at least a greater probability the Kohen Gadol is always using the right blood for the right avoda. The Gemara says, but one second, because I will say, I will say, here's what it really comes down to. The Gemara is suggesting Rabbi Huda's real concern is mishum chulsha de Kohen Gadol lav adaite, because the Kohen Gadol is weakened. Because again, he's fasting, he's doing all of the avoda, he's not going to be as attentive, which I will say is so fascinating. Because if there's one thing we rely upon on Yom Kippur, it's what? It's what? The Kohen Gadol's attentiveness, right? But what it's saying is no one is ever fully attentive to everything all the time, 100%. In other words, there's always some level, there's always some possibility of human error. So therefore, the Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda only wants one stand because we're concerned that because of the weakness of the Kohen Gadol, he's going to make a mistake and mix up the blood. So the Gemara says, this has to be Rabbi Yehuda's shita. De'ilo teimahachi, below ksiva nami. Truth is, Rabbi will say, even if the stands are not labeled, it's kind of hard to confuse the blood of the par with the blood of the shiur. Why? Number one, hai nafish v'hai zutar. Rabbi will say, there's a lot more dam hapar than there is dam shiur. It's just volume-wise, there was much more blood in the bowl of the dam hapar than there was the dam shiur. Well, maybe you'll say no. Well, maybe the Kohen Gadol, maybe I'll say for Kabbalah, they only took a little bit of the blood of the par and not all of the blood. To which maybe from a volume perspective, maybe there was the same amount of dam hapar, dam shiur. That's not true. I'll tell you. The Gemara says, "V'ha'amar Rav Yehuda hashochet tzarich sheyekabel es kol damo shel par shne'emar v'es kol dam hapar yishboch al yisod hamizbeach." That's not true, Bosai, because again, when they did the shechita, they were makabel all of the dam of the par. Now, when we say all of the dam, so remember again, that's the dam hanefesh. It's not literally all of the blood, but rather again, it's all of the blood that spurts out, the blood, the life blood that spurts out with the shechita. So I will say, so therefore, again, the Gemara just says, it's really hard to confuse the dam of the par with the dam of the shiur. Why? Because number one, there's a lot more dam hapar. And maybe you'll say, but one second, even if originally there's a lot more dam of the par in the bowl than dam of the shiur, maybe some of the blood spills. So if you're looking from like a volume perspective, it could be that maybe they're the same, but still there's another distinction. Hai shiur v'hai sumak. So apparently, I will say goat blood is well, I should say differently. So par blood is dark red. Goat blood is light red. So what the Gemara is just suggesting is the probability and possibility of the Kohen Gadol getting confused. They're so different. Number one, there's so much more par blood than shiur blood. Number two, the par blood is dark red and the shiur blood is light red. So we'll say, but rather, what is Rabbi Yehuda concerned about? Elo mishum chulsha de Kohen Gadol lav adaite. Hachinami mishum chulsha de Kohen Gadol lav adaite. So we'll say, ultimately, again, what Rabbi Yehuda's concern is like this. It's just that the Kohen Gadol is weakened, he's running around, and therefore afraid of confusion. So in Rabbi Yehuda's mind, the only way to avoid mixing up the blood is how? One stand. Because I will say, what does one stand ensure? You always kind of have to know which blood you're holding on to, right? It forces you to be attentive ultimately to the type of blood you're handling. So also listen to this story. Hahu dinachas kamei derava. Amar, so let's listen to this. There was a particular, now this is talking, look at Rashi. Hahu shliach tzibur dinachas kamei derava. V'haya omer seid Yom Kippurim betfila. Yom Kippur is going to be much more special for us this year, because I will say this year when we get to Musaf and we do the Seder HaAvoda, right? The Seder HaAvoda, you will say some people, the first time they heard about Seder HaAvoda was from Yishai Ribo. When he sang the song of Seder HaAvoda, wow, it's so beautiful. Where did this come from? I've never seen this before. Yeah, we say it every single year, right? Every single year in Musaf. Just to say, to be honest, is like the most complicated part of Yom Kippur and the most fatigue-ridden part of Yom Kippur. But I think this year, I mean, there happens to be if you have the Yishai Ribo's nigun in your ear, it's definitely incredible for the Kavana as well. But I think this year it'll take on a much more heightened significance for us because we will actually know what it's talking about. We're going through the Avoda. So listen to this. So one year, there was a chazan who was davening Musaf Yom Kippur in front of Rava. Right, Musaf Yom Kippur in front of Rava. And remember, as part of Musaf Yom Kippur, right, he was going through the Seder HaAvoda. And look how he phrased the Seder HaAvoda. He said, Amar, Yatz, he's speaking about the Kohen Gadol. Yatza, the Kohen Gadol would emerge from the Kodesh HaKadoshim. V'henicho al kan sheni shebehecho. And he placed the Dam Hapar on the second stand in the Heichal. So right, in the Chazan's repetition over here, in his recitation of the Avoda, he's making reference to a second stand, two stands, which Rabbi says the opinion of who? The opinion of who? The Rabbanon, or the Tanakama. Then he said, Naftol dam hapar v'yeniach dam hasoyer. And then he said, the Kohen lifted up the dam hapar, and he put down the dam hasoyer. Which makes it sound like what? Makes it sound like what? There's one stand. So we'll say, so Rabbi says to him, Amar lei, chad v'kirabanan, the chad v'kirab Yehuda. Says, Chazin, make up your mind. Right? You, on one statement, you make it sound like the Rabbanan, that there were two stands, and on the second statement, you made it sound like there was only one stand. So he says to him, Ema, heniach dam hasoyer, v'natal dam hapar. So therefore, Rava tells him the proper way to go ahead and recite this ultimately is to say that he went ahead and he placed down the dam hasoyer and picked up the dam hapar, which I will say ultimately I'll quote to you from the Rambam. Just a moment here. Sorry. So the Rambam paskins like this, in fact, in the halacha over here. And the Rambam says, find this for you. Hilchos Yoma Kippurim, Parak Dalit Halacha Beis. So the Rambam writes, he says, alright, he said, you know what the truth is, I'll tell you this outside. He goes in and he explains that halacha lamaisa, we paskin in fact like the Rabbanon, and halacha lamaisa, there were in fact two stands. There were two stands in the Beis HaMikdash which were labeled. They were labeled, one was labeled Dam HaPar, one was labeled Dam HaSoyer, and ultimately again, now remember, practically, was the Kohen Gadol ever holding both bloods together? No, he was never holding both bloods together. So remember again, if he picked up one, he was putting down the other. But Allah, again, there were two separate stands in the Beis HaMikdash. So we'll say so incredible. This brings to a close this sugya. I will point out that Rabbi Huda does not hold to the concept of Breira. That is clear the Gemara's paskening, but that's kind of like a side issue. We also know about the Rambam paskin, ultimately again, back in Shkolim, that there was no collection box for obligatory bird offerings. That we did see beforehand. And that halacha l'maisa, for a Yom Kippur perspective, there were two stands in the Mikdash. One marked Dam Hapar, one marked Dam Asar. Incredible. Both says go a little bit weiter. Tan Rabbanon. I'm sorry. V'hizo imenu ala parochas keneged ar muchas. Both says, remember again, the Kohen Gadol is doing two acts of sprinkling. One act of sprinkling inside of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, one outside of the Kodesh HaKadoshim corresponding to the curtain. In other words, what he does inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim corresponding to the Aron, right? The Echad Lamala of Sheva Lamata, he does the same thing outside of the Kodesh HaKadoshim corresponding to the curtain. So says the Gemara Tan Rabbanon, V'chein yaseh li Ohel Moed. The pasuk says, so shall he do in the Ohel Moed. Ma Talmud Omer, what is that pasuk teaching us? Keshem shemaza lifnai v'lifnim, kach maza behechol. The same way, as I just said before, the same way that he sprinkles the blood, lifnai v'lifnim, inside of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, this is the same way, kach maza behechol. It's the same way that he sprinkles inside of the Beis HaMikdash as well. Ma lifnai, or I should say in the hechal, bosa means outside of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, inside of the Kodesh, facing the curtain. Ma lifnai v'lifnim, achal smala b'sheva lamata. Just like inside of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, he does one above, seven below. Midam apar, kach maza behechal. So he does the same thing in the hechal as well. Ukishim shlifnai v'lifnim, achal smala b'sheva lamata midam asoyer. And the same way that inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim, he does one above and seven below of the dam hasoyer. Kach maza behechal. He does the same thing in the hechal as well. So we'll say, let's end off with this. This is so beautiful. Hashochen itam besoch tu'umasam. The pasuk says that the Ribono Shel Olam resides with us. It resides with us. Hashochen itam resides with us besoch tu'umasam, even in the midst of our tumah. So the Gemara says, this is so beautiful. Afilu, last line in Vavam and Beis, afilu b'shas shein tmein, shchina imayim. Even when we are tamei, ultimately the shchina resides with us. We'll say, is that not the ultimate message of hope? Even when we are tamei, ultimately again the shchina resides with us. We'll say, let's just finish. There was a tztuki who said to Rabbi Chanina, listen to this. This is top of Nun Zayin. Hashta bari tmein asun. So this tzadduki said to Rabbi Chanina, your God has left you. Your God has left you. Why? because you're all tmei. Look at Rashi. Hashta bari vaday tmei asun ve'ein shchina beinechem shorim betuma. Right. So ultimately, again, this tzeduki, Sadri Chanina, your God does not reside with you anymore. Why not? You're tamei. You're tamei. There's no way that your God resides with you. At the end of the day, you're tamei. After all, the chsiv tumasa bishulaha. I will say very profound from Eicha, when the Navi describes the disgrace to Yerushalayim, it describes that her tumah is on the hem of her dress. The idea that her tumah is apparent to all. So this Tzeduki said to Rabbi Chanina, your God, who is the embodiment of Tara, who is the embodiment of purity, the embodiment of goodness, has surely forsaken you, because now you are all so tamei. To which Rabbi Chanina responds, Amar lei. Rabbi Chanina says back to him, Amar lei, ta'chazi maksiv behu. So Rabbi Chanina refers this Tzeduki ultimately again to this pasuk. What does the pasuk say? Hashochin itam besoch tu'umasam. Look what the pasuk says. Our God resides with us. Besoch tu'umasam, even in the midst of our tumah. Afilu bizman shein tmein shchina sharuya beinehen. Even when we are tamei, the shchina resides with us. So we'll say this is what Rabbi Chanina counted to the Stuki. So we'll say, I'll just mention, it's interesting, the lashon of hashochin itam besoch tumasam, right? So the pasuk could have just said hashochin itam what? Bitumasam. Bitumasam. Why besoch? Besoch means in the midst of our tumah. So of course, it could be on one hand, that besoch tumasam means even when we are so shakua bitumah, even when we are mamish, like, you could be like a shtik tamei, and you could be very tamei, right? A person could go ahead and touch a sheretz. I'm using that as a script. Or a person could touch a corpse. Two different types of tumah. Perhaps what the pasuk is saying is, even when you are enmeshed and immersed in tumah, even when you are totally consumed by tumah, bisoch tumah sam, ultimately, again, the Ribono Shel Olam is with us. It doesn't matter how defiled you become. It doesn't matter how compromised I allow myself to become. It doesn't matter how enveloped of Tumah I may be. The Ribono Shel Olam never leaves my side. No matter how badly I mess up in life, no matter, this is the great anomaly of our relationship with Hashem, no matter how much I leave Him, no matter how much I distance myself from Him, He, the Ribono Shel Olam, the Melech Malchei Amlachim, never leaves me, even if it's besoch tumasam. But perhaps it could also mean like this, that why is it that the Ribono Shel Olam never leaves us, even when we're tamei? Because Rabbi says, Hashachin itam besoch tumasam. See, because the Ribono Shel Olam is able to see what is besoch tumasam. And I will say, what happens when you look into the tumah of a Jew? When you look into the tumah, when you go beneath all of the surfaces of tumah, what do you find? What do you find? Beautiful Tara. Beautiful Tara. A beautiful neshama. A beautiful holiness. Because there is no such thing as a Jew who doesn't possess holiness. There is no such thing as a Jew who doesn't possess goodness. There is no such thing as a Jew who doesn't possess luminescent kedusha. Just sometimes it's buried underneath a lot of layers, and the world doesn't see it, and sometimes even my loved ones don't see it. Sometimes no one could see it, but at the end of the day, hashochin itam besoch tumasam. The reason that Ribono Shel Olam never leaves us is because He sees besoch tumasam, inside all of that tumah, beneath all of that tumah, is something worth saving, is something holy, is something beautiful. The Ribono Shel Olam sees it. We just have to have the koach to see it within ourselves, and ultimately to be able to see it in the other as well. We'll stop over here. We'll pick up at Mir Hashem top of Nun Zayin tomorrow. Shkoyach.